So we're a day later this week, but here's another edition of Miller's Movers where we catch up on the weekend that's just been, and of course the all-important handicap movers and shakers. And this week, an early Ante-Post bet for the Paddy Power Gold Cup at Cheltenham. For the weekend that's just been, the focus was largely on Wetherby on Saturday, I felt. Jello winning the Charlie Hall chase. This was a frustrating result for me. I sort of think I got the working out right. There was going to be a strong pace. It was going to suit horses that were finishing off the pace. I went with the older boy Hewitt, who simply hasn't got the legs for this sort of grader race anymore. But it was the younger horses, having the old Jello, that came through to pick it up, or join in picking it up, going down to the last. Rather long at the last, took the top with him, but landed running and got the better of Pic Dory, who I thought ran with real credit. I thought when Jello came to challenge, I thought you might see Pic Dory, who was unproven at this trip, slightly fold and turn it in a bit, but no such thing at all. He galloped all the way to the line. It was a really good run by both horses, probably some way off top level 3-mile chase form, but it was still a good race and a promising start for Jello, who improved last year on his second start, went to the Peterborough chase, was very impressive indeed. And I think that's where they're going to go again. They're going to drop back in trip. Venetia Williams didn't think that would be a concern on slower ground. I thought they might be quite heartened by this run by Pic Dory and entertain the King George, but it doesn't seem that that's the way they're thinking at the moment. There was talk of the 1965 chase at Ascot. The Peterborough chase was also thrown in. He'd be better possibly going back right-handed, but his main aim will be the Ascot chase, which he's won for the last couple of seasons. So no King George run for him. I thought he'd have been interesting, but clearly not. Of the others, Garlaw, I think he needs to drop back into handicap company now. He ran pretty well at the weights, but he's not at this level and did show, though, his stamina. So maybe handicaps over this sort of trip throughout the season might see him win a race or two. The supporting card, well, the big talking race was Golden Ace, the champion hurdle winner, getting beaten in a match with the Dan Scout and trained Katira. Some real nonsense spoken on social media about how moderate this mare is. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that she was a fortunate winner of the champion hurdle last year after what happened with Constitution Hill and then State Man coming down at the last. But she wasn't going to be beaten a mile in the champion hurdle if State Man had stood up. She was staying on. She'd have been a good runner-up, I think, and then she did go to Punchestown and run a pretty decent race there. For all that State Man came out on top, I thought she ran with credit and gave some sort of credence to a champion hurdle run that, she's not a bad mare at all. And I would point out that her form last year at the start of the season was very moderate as well. Yes, she did win it in Camden, but she rather fell over the line on desperate ground. She improved massively in the spring, as mares can do. She scoped dirty. Jeremy Scott was clearly disappointed, but I think to use that run at Wetherby to sully what she achieved in the champion hurdle last year for small connections and had a really great day, I thought was pretty poor. And then the other race, the Stayers hurdle race, strong leader. Well, we got that right, myself and TC, but he wasn't as impressive as I hoped. And take no chances for Dan Scout certainly stayed better than I'd anticipated, but strong leader got it done. He might well improve now. Ascot does seem to be his track, a stiff track, like Ascot with a hill. Without the undulations, he just doesn't cope with Cheltenham coming down a hill. At Ascot, it's a very moderate downhill stretch and quite a nice pull home. Seems to suit him well. So I expect that's where he'll go next. But he was disappointing in his performance, but pleasing to see the result. And then quickly on to Sunday, where the focus was at Carlisle for the Colin Parker. And I was very surprised to see that Resplendent Grey was able to get the better of the Ben Pauling trained handstands. Resplendent Grey, a stamina-laden performer, really. He was good here. And again, another inspired ride by Sean Bowen, sort of let Ben Jones go on, try and make the running from somewhere out at Carlisle, which is difficult to do. Sean sat off him, let him do all the donkey work, and then picked him up with a real strong run up the final furlong. So Resplendent Grey, he's going to get a rise for this, but he's in the Hennessy, the Coral Gold Cup as it is now. He wasn't massively high up my list, I have to say, but this performance over a trip that should have been too short on ground, that should have been too lively, and by all accounts off a prep that wasn't 100% according to his trainer, Ollie Murphy. Resplendent Grey has certainly come into my reckoning now for the Coral Gold Cup at Newbury. Starting with the handicap movers and shakers now, and we'll start with horses going up in the handicap. And we're going to go all the way back to last Sunday at Aintree. Jordan's Cross won the novice handicap chase over 2 miles for Anthony Honeywell, Ben Godfrey. He's got a rise of £6 from 120 up to 126. His jumping took a while to warm up, but once it did, he was very good indeed, very neat, very accurate, and crucially, when under pressure, His jumping was really good up the home straight at Aintree. He's £6 higher now. The fact he jumps so well, there's more obstacles in the chase than there is in hurdles, suggests that this mark is more than workable, 126. And that's before you factor in that he's got proven form over further than this, up to 2.5 miles over hurdles. So they can gradually step him up in trip, or if the ground goes slow, he should be suited by a stamina test at this trip. I don't think this new mark will stop George Cross. Would just caveat in there that Anthony Honeyball's in flying form at the moment, 31% strike rate for the last 14 days. That will have to slow invariably at some stage, so that's something to watch out for. But at the moment, you could do far worse than back his horses blind. And I'm sure if George Cross is turned out in the next couple of weeks, 2 miles and a bit further on decent ground, or 2 miles on slow ground, mark of 126 won't stop him from winning again. Bangor, Molto Bene also got off to a good chase start for Charlie Longsdon. Gone up £7 now to a mark of 117. But this is a horse that I'd put a negative against. I will be against this horse next time, so don't go putting this in as a handicap mover and shaker to follow it. Be a handicap mover and shaker to oppose, simply for the fact that this is perhaps starting to follow a theme. She won very impressively last season at Chepstow over hurdles. She won off 108, she went up to 116, and her season fell apart. She's again had wind surgery in the closed season, so this win off 110 came on her first start since wind surgery. She's up £7 now to a mark of 117. It could be that she's had a different form of wind surgery this time, and it's done the trick, and it's going to hold on a little bit longer. But I think all things being equal, a £7 rise and the fact her form tailed off last season after a debut win means that I'd be looking to take Molto Bene on next time, or at the very least be avoiding backing her at what might be a short price. Onto a mare now, and probably a horse that's got the lowest rating of any horse ever to feature on a Miller's Movers. It's Damekap for Seamus Mullins. She's gone up £5 to the lofty mark of 64, having raised £10 out the handicap on her chase debut over 3 miles at Fakenham. She found it all happening a bit quick, but she was staying on quite well. She was fortunate to finish third. There was a faller in front of her. She'd have been fourth if not for that. She was beaten around about 10 lengths. But I do think this was a step forward, and anything she's shown over hurdles for this yard. Her point-to-point form, she was second in a point-to-point on desperate ground, just looked like an out-and-out stayer. And I think if Seamus Mullins can get her into a race, and that is going to be a bit of a challenge off this mark of 64, into a race on a slightly more galloping track on desperate ground, the closer to being abandoned it is, the better it's going to suit her. I think Damekap can win a small race, and it will be a small race, but a small race off her low mark of 64. The season is starting to get into swing now, and we're starting to find some themes. And one of those themes that I found so far is that Joe Tizard's horses are definitely needing a run and stepping forward for a run. So I thought Ambion View up £3 for his effort at Newton Abbot over 2 miles, 3 furlongs last week, up to a mark of 123. Finished runner-up to JJ Moon. It was actually 2 mile 5. The race at Newton Abbot, not 2 mile 3, but 2 mile 5. Runner up to JJ Moon, who got a really good ride from Harry Cobden. Ambion View just looked to get tired in the closing stages. A few have from the Tizard yard. He's got bits and bobs of form that suggest he should be way better than this mark. He beat Ace of Spades, who won this week, is now rated at 130. He beat him in a novice. So 123 shouldn't be beyond Ambion View, particularly given that Joe Tizard's horses will likely step forward for their first run. So Ambion View, next time out, if he's in the right grade in the right race, he'd certainly be interesting. 2 more to focus on going up in the handicap, and the first is Alexei, who won at Ascot. As I said, a second start for the Joe Tizard yard. That was the angle here. He won very impressively. He'd been runner-up at the Welsh Champion Hurdle at Chepstow on his seasonal return behind Celtic Dino, but he tanked through the race at Ascot, almost a little bit too free through the early stages, held up at the rear of the field, got there going very nicely indeed, and cleared away after the final hurdle. Good ground, clearly suits this German-bred gelding. So he's up now £7 to a mark of 134, but the other thing to flag up here is that the handicapper has reassessed that Welsh champion hurdle run, and he's given Celtic Dino a further £3 rise, a collateral rise. So poor old Celtic Dino stood in his stable in South Wales at Sam Thomas's, got a £3 rise. That does mean that if they go towards the Greatwood Hurdle, which looks likely to be their next target, the Greatwood Hurdle on the Sunday at the next Cheltenham meeting, that Alexei would be £3 better off for about 2 3/4 lengths from the Welsh champion hurdle. So that should bring them closer together. They're both at the head of the market. I'll actually be looking away from the pair of them. I'll look to take them both on. But if you like Celtic, Dino or Alexei, there's an amendment to their handicap ratings that does mean they're now more closely weighted than they might have been. And then one final horse going up in the handicap, and probably I think the most interesting horse going up in the handicap this week, and it's Strong Foundations for trainer Sam Drinkwater. Ran at Wetherby under Robbie Dunn, a patient ride by Robbie Dunn. It's probably as it's best described, and then perhaps didn't make his move early enough up the home straight at Wetherby. Finished with a really wet sail. He's gone up £2 now to a mark of 107 for that runners-up effort. He jumped really well. Sam Drinkwater does tend to do well with his chasers, and I think a mark of 107 on the pick of Strong Foundations' best novice hurdle form. He's definitely better than that, and he'd be one to watch out for wherever he goes next, particularly on a more galloping track. 3 non-movers this week, and the first is Reinado for Neil Mulholland, who stays on a mark of 93. Was running a good race at Fosslas, dropped back in trip, slower ground at Fosslas, coming down to the last. It was a bunch finish, but looked to be going well and just clipped the top of the hurdle and knuckled over on landing. And by no means saying that this horse was a surefire winner of that race at Fosslas, but was certainly still travelling powerfully. Showed quite a big knee action there, so the soft ground clearly suited. Stays on a mark of 93, providing the fall has no lasting effects. I think the mark of 93 is certainly be workable in the not too distant future for Reinado, for Neil Mulholland. And another one from Fosslas is Donnacha for Nigel Hawke. Was running a good race off a mark of 128, which remains unchanged when trying to take the second last fence with him. Knuckled over. How he stood up, I don't know. It's to the horse's testament. He really tried hard to get back on his feet, but his winning chance had gone. I think he probably was going to come off second best anyway to Philandra. But he'd be far better off at the weights next time with Philandra, around about £8 better off next time. He wasn't going to be beaten anywhere near as far as 8 lengths, which is what that should equate to. So I think Donnacha, with a clear round of jumping, and he is generally a pretty decent jumper, had a good season last season as a novice chaser. A mark of 128 is a career high mark, but on this evidence, it's not beyond him yet. The Stuart Edmonds trained Volakes caught my eye last season at Chepstow. Went off like a scalded cat on desperate ground at Chepstow. Looked for all money like she would be swallowed up the home straight, and then just kept on coming. Eventually finished fourth, but didn't tire anywhere near as much as you'd have expected. I followed next time at Sandown, but again pulled far too hard at the rear of the field, pulled away any chance might have had. It's got down now to a mark of 102, which remains unchanged for a reappearance run last week, where crucially settled at the back of the field and didn't pull, relaxed really nicely, stayed on quite well in the closing stages. I think a mark of 102 is going to certainly prove workable for Lakes in a fairly quiet little race somewhere, probably in midweek for Stuart Edmonds. And then the final non-mover is Blow Your Wad for trainer Tom Lacey. My selection in the 3-mile handicap chase at Ascot. Plenty of people questioning whether he would get the trip. I certainly didn't have any concerns on that front, and certainly on the evidence of it. He wants a little bit further, if anything, but the ground was maybe a bit lively. He sort of got a bit outpaced turning in, rallied, just didn't quite have the closing kick of the few that finished in front of him. Finished fourth. He stays on a mark of 142. His win in recent seasons came at Kempton on soft ground. I think if he returns there, 3 miles on soft ground, this mark of 142 is definitely within range. Again, the one thing I would caveat is Tom Lacey's yard is going along particularly well at the moment. It stands to reason that form will dip at some point, so that would be a mild concern. I'd like to see Blow Your Wad out sooner rather than later off this unchanged mark of 142 once there's a little bit more give in the ground. One new entry this week, and it's a horse that should already be in your tracker because I've flagged him up as a really impressive individual at Chepstow for their opening meet of the season. And it's High Tea for trainer Kim Bailey and Matt Nichols. He ran at Stratford last week, a good bit of placing by these trainers to get the third handicap run in. Ran a sharp track over 2 miles. It was never going to suit him. The slower ground seemed to suit him better. He stayed on quite well, but he was always in top gear. But he's got an opening mark of 105. I'll be absolutely stunned if this horse is not significantly better than that mark, stepping up in trip. Would be interesting though whether they see that this horse is particularly well handicapped. And I think it would view it that if you see this horse over 2 miles on a galloping track on soft ground, they think that a mark of 105 is more than workable, because certainly this is a horse that's going to improve when he steps up in trip. So wherever High Tea goes next, soft ground and a galloping track over 2 miles, or soft ground and up in trip over 2 mile 2, 2 mile 3, 2 mile 4, I will be a follower of this horse. I think he's got himself well handicapped, and I think he's set for a good season. And to finish with handicap movers and shakers, 3 horses coming down in the handicap. And the first is Pat's Fancy for Rebecca Curtis. He ran at Foss last, 3 mile 1 furlong. He's come down £2 now to a mark of 120. He finished 4th. It's the first decent race he's run for a very long time. He returned from a long layoff last season, couldn't really find his rhythm, but he's been rated as high as 144 in the past. He beat Imperial Alcazar at Chepstow a couple of seasons ago. That horse went on to finish second in the Festival Plate at the Cheltenham Festival off a mark of 152. It was decent form, but Pat's Fancy got injured, lost his way afterwards, never really got at it last year, but he's come down in the weights a long way. Mark of 120 looks workable, and it's the first race that he's really sort of run with any sort of zest. He just got tired in the closing stages, beaten around about 10 lengths, wasn't given a hard time once his chance had gone. And I think if he gets on soft ground, particularly around the likes of Chepstow, which he's got some good form at, and wouldn't just be giving up on Pat's Fancy just yet, and a mark of 120 should aid his chance of getting back in the winner's enclosure. No Tackle is a horse that Robbie Lowen's done well with in previous seasons. He's had 2 wins. Both have come at Leicester on soft ground over 2 mile 6. I thought it was a good bit of placing to go to Newton Abbot on lively ground. And I think the handicap's been pretty generous, dropping No Tackle from a mark of 111 down to 108 for that sole run. It was all happening too quick for him. This is undoubtedly a prep race for later in the season. So No Tackle, pop him in your tracker, particularly if he turns up at Leicester on desperate ground. 2 mile 6, that's where he's seen to best effect. And 108, although it's above his career high winning mark, it's certainly a workable mark in my opinion. And the final one in handicap movers and shakers coming down in the handicap, and this might sound a bit like sour grapes, but I really promise it isn't, is General Medrano, who was my nap selection at the weekend. I thought he got a pretty tepid ride, if I'm honest, by Ben Jones. Seemed to get shuffled back, lose his position, made some pretty good progress up the home straight to Ascot, but wasn't, I don't think, given a vintage ride to be seen to best effect. It's of some consolation to me, and I suspect connections. He's got an extra pound back. He's down to 139. I was convinced that there was an argument that he was still a well-handicapped horse of 140, so I'm not going to change my opinion. Now he's come down a pound for one poor run, and I think there were valid excuses given the assistance he was given from the saddle. So General Medrano stays in my tracker, a mark of 139, 2 mile handicap chase on galloping tracks, should see him win again. And so to finish this week, I've taken a look at the Paddy Power Gold Cup 2 mile 4 furlong handicap chase on the old course at Cheltenham. I love these type of races. I enjoy having a good look early on. And the horse I like is actually a horse that's in my 10 to follow. It's Vincenzo for Sam Thomas, off a mark of 137. Last seen finishing runner-up at Newbury in a 2 mile 4 handicap chase, where he got run down very late on by Booster Bob, who got that most remarkable ride from Sean Bowen. If you remember, Booster Bob was all but tailed off and came with a wet sail up the home straight. That was to the detriment of Vincenzo, who'd been in a prolonged battle with Sansegal, who eventually finished 3rd, got the better of him jumping the last, and had nothing left in reserves to repel the very fast finishing Booster Bob. But I didn't think really Vincenzo did an awful lot wrong. And interestingly, Sansegal, who was back in 3rd, beaten around about 5 lengths by Vincenzo, he's won off a £5 higher mark since. He's now rated £9 higher, whereas Vincenzo is just £3 higher on 137, having raced off 134 at Newbury. And prior to that, his form when winning at Sandown over 2 miles, beaten Doyen de Bar. Doyen de Bar's come out and won since at Ayr, so that form looks solid. He's had just 4 runs over fences, Vincenzo. He's won 2 of them. He's only had 1 try at the 2 mile 4 furlong trip. He looked to me like he stayed it very well indeed. And he's a young horse, progressive horse. Sam Thomas, an excellent target trainer. The ground will come all alike to him. He'll cope with a bit of cut in the ground. He'll cope with a slightly livelier surface. And crucially, for these 2 mile 4 handicap chases around Cheltenham, you do need to have a little bit of tactical pace. So the fact he's got 2 wins on the board over 2 miles over fences is certainly going to stand him in good stead. Currently, as the weight stand, he'd race off 10 stone, but I'd expect those to rise because the top weight currently is Protectorat with a rating of 165. I find it hard to believe the scouts will run him, although they've got to run him somewhere, but I think 165 and a handicap around Cheltenham would perhaps put them off. I'd expect the weights to rise down to the next current highest rated, which is 157, so probably an £8 rise. That's still going to give Vincenzo a lovely light racing rate, with Dylan Johnston, stable jockey, taking off a further £3. Currently 20-1 with SPK. Now, I know plenty of people will point out that that isn't available each way. My suggestion would be, I find it very hard to believe this isn't going to be my selection come the day, or certainly one of my selections come the day. Split your stake, have a small win bet now, Ante-Post, and then come the day, you can go back in again when each way terms are available. I think Vincenzo, young horse, unexposed at these trips, unexposed in handicaps for Sam Thomas, has got plenty going for him for the Paddy Power Gold Cup. That's it for this week. I'll be back again same time next week. We'll also have a special guest delving into all things National Hunt racing for the season. In the meantime, enjoy your betting and be lucky.